Good morning. So this morning I'm going to start with a question for you, and I expect you to think about the answer, and I'll give you the answer at the end. So the question is, where in the Bible does salmon become the father of a boozer? Okay, now a little bit of me is hoping that you get so tied up in thinking about the answer to that you forget to actually listen to what I'm saying, and that's fine. So, one of the things that was in my head on Sunday morning when I was in church was the song by the group Queen called Under Pressure. And what I realised later was it was just pressure I was putting myself under. Nobody else was putting me under pressure. But I put so much on myself that I got to the point where I was in an absolute state. And if it wasn't for the fact that one of my friends was sitting next to me and one of my dearest friends was standing in front of me doing the service, I might have just dissolved into a puddle. And it's all because of pressure. Pressure I was putting myself under, which is something we all do. And it's a nonsense. But I have to tell you, I'm really, really good at it. And I always say you should stick to what you're good at. But maybe I shouldn't be sticking to that one. And neither should you if you're the sort of person who does it. So what that led me to thinking about next was the people who are demonstrating over the last few weeks about climate change and wanting there to be action about climate change. Now, in this country, we have the laws of freedom of speech, and provided we're not blasphemous and we're not litigious and libel people or slander people, we can pretty much say what we think and believe. And within reasonable parameters, we can do what we please. Again, as long as we don't damage property or people. But what the climate changes people have been protesting is they've been blocking motorways, they've been blocking roads, they're blocking oil refineries, they're doing all sorts of blocking so that it causes huge disruption. They haven't been doing much physical damage, but they've been causing a lot of distress, a lot of anger, a lot of anxiety, and there are some people who believe they've been causing deaths by blocking traffic, by causing massive traffic jams. They've caused emergency services to be unable to get to help people who need to get to hospital, who need care, who need protection. So we're having introduced a new law which stops them from doing that. But why do they do it? And I think it's a pressure they put on themselves, a pressure of conscience. We all know that we've done stupid, mad things to the world. We've introduced things that are not natural, that God didn't put here. And those people's conscience is telling them they need to do something to make it change. They're putting pressure on themselves to make change. And many of us think they're putting the wrong pressure on, a wrong pressure that affects everybody. And whilst I'm one of those who think this isn't the way to do it, there's a big bit of me that admires their dedication to changing the world in a way that in the end will benefit future generations. Because the future is what we're about, isn't it? But also in the Bible it says, don't worry about tomorrow, tomorrow will have concerns for itself. But that's quite hard for most of us to take because we live in a society where planning is important. So I understand the pressure these people are under, but I think they're doing it the wrong way. So on Sunday morning, I was under so much pressure. It's pressure I put on myself. See, by profession, I'm an English teacher. That's what I trained to be. That was my desire from the age of about 5. I know that's rubbish, but from the age of about 5, I decided I wanted to teach, and I wanted to teach English because I wanted everybody in the world to love reading, to love books, to love the way things were written, the way things were said, as much as I did. And I'm one of those people who I was very, very blessed because I got to do my dream. I went to university, I got my degree, I started teaching. I started teaching in secondary schools, so I got to teach English. I taught mostly 14 to 19-year-olds, which some people go, how could you want to do that? And it's simple. I absolutely loved it. It was a joy. It was an absolute delight. And sadly, I left teaching. I was retired because I had a breakdown in 2001. And it wasn't because of the teaching. It was because of the pressures I put myself under after being very, very seriously and persistently bullied by the head of English and the head of the school I was teaching in. And it wasn't the children, it wasn't the teenagers, although they were great big lumping things. They were brilliant. I loved it. But I put myself under pressure to perform in ways that I couldn't. And consequently, I had a breakdown and had to leave teaching. And it was all about pressure, about me wanting to be more than I could be in ways that I couldn't be it. So come to Sunday morning in church, I read the prayers. I never read the prayers because of my visual impairment. I can't scan. And most people who read, they scan ahead. We learn it very quickly. And I simply couldn't scan. So for a week, I looked very carefully at these printed prayers and I thought I'd got them. Sally very kindly photocopied them into large print so I could see the print. And when I read the prayers on Sunday morning, I got a few things wrong. I split an infinitive, which some of you won't have a clue what that is, and it doesn't really matter. And I missed a comma. So I didn't quite get the timing right in the sentence. And I felt like an utter failure. And as Sally and my friend Joe, who sat next to me, said later, "What's that?" And they said, "Nobody noticed." But I knew I'd made a mistake. And later, some of the people who were in the service, who were visitors because they'd come for a baptism, said to me, "Oh, those were really nice prayers." And it took me a while to come to terms with the fact that I'd made a mistake, or 2 mistakes actually, and nobody had noticed, because I put this pressure on myself to get it perfect, to be right, to make it absolutely right. And actually in the Bible, we're not called to be perfect. We're called to be like Jesus. And one of the lines in the prayers, which are not prayers I'd written, but they were lovely prayers. I really liked them when I read them, so I wanted to do them. But one of the lines talks about us being God's imperfect people. He doesn't expect us to be perfect. He expects us to keep trying to be like Jesus, because that's how he wants us to be. So what I've learned over the last few days, is stop trying to be something I'm not. I'm not perfect. I can't see well enough to read easily. What I did was my best. And Jesus always says that our best is good enough. So the prayers were good enough. I didn't need to put that pressure on myself. So back to the question. So where in the Bible does Salmon become the father of a boozer? Well, it's in Matthew chapter 1, verse 5. And once I walked into church and the vicar was in a bit of a state. So this is about 40 years ago. He was in a bit of a state because the person doing the reading had not turned up. And knowing I was an English teacher, he says, "Oh, Rena, would you just come and do the reading today?" He says, "There's a few tricky names in it, but really just remember this. As long as you read them quickly and confidently, nobody will know if you mispronounce them." And being a lot more confident then, I just said, "Oh, okay." And Matthew chapter 1 is about the lineage of Jesus. And he wanted me to read it from the King James Version. So it has an awful lot of begat. So it says Jacob begat Isaac begat, and so on. And I had a quick scan through it, and I thought, yeah, I can manage most of those. And in verse 5, it says, Salmon begat Booz, B-O-O-Z. In modern translation, that is translated to Boaz. So we pronounce it differently, but it was definitely B-O-O-Z. Except in my head, I was making it make sense. So when I read the Bible, when I read that reading, I read it as, and Salmon begat Boozer, because I know the word boozer, and it was a huge mistake because people were laughing. And when I got down and finished the reading, the vicar, his name was Simon, I think, stood up and he said, "I'm not sure I can do my sermon now." He said, "because I have just got tears running down my face," and he couldn't stop giggling because he said, "I'm just thinking that Jesus came from a boozer." And everybody in church started, myself included, started laughing then. And it was just a really silly time. But actually it put the mistake into perspective because it was funny, it was silly, it was imperfect. But it made us think differently. So pressure, putting ourselves under pressure, that's not what God wants. What he wants is us as we are, including me as I am. So I hope if you're putting yourself under pressure this week, you just learn to stop and listen and know that you're one of God's wonderfully imperfect people. God bless you. Bye.